Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I want to talk to you about staying on top of research and how do you actually keep on top of scientific research in your field. So if you don't know me, I'm an associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out that I wanted to pay the favor forward and help you out. All right, so staying on top of research in any particular field is challenging for all of us. For me, I always feel like I'm behind the times. Every time that I read a certain set of articles, I'm always behind with the work that I'm doing. Now, why is that the case? Well, science itself is continuously updating and building on previous research. So not only do you need to know what the state of the research is in your particular domain, but often the domains are sort of expanding and going in different directions. And the reason why that is happening is that there's new scholars that are coming in. Maybe they're citing that literature, and so you have to identify those particular new scholars that are in different locations around the world. And then the other thing that's happening is that if you're doing it correctly and you're creating a corpus of knowledge, a body of knowledge, what you're doing is you are taking that research and you're expanding it into different domains. And so research streams and research should continuously be expanding, kind of like entropy that happens in the world around us, or the university or the universe around us, right? So things are constantly expanding, they're constantly changing, and they're evolving as we build on top of what other people are doing. And the way that you sort of see this is you look at previous citations within the literature, and you can constantly see that there's a branching sort of pattern that happens within the literature in every single field, in every single domain. That's why sort of citations matter with the literature, and that's why we often sort of look to see at what, how many articles a paper gets, or how many citations a paper gets in terms of understanding what their impact is in the research domain. So this makes it incredibly hard for all of us to keep on track of what the sort of latest state of the art is. And we're always, doesn't matter who you are, we're always feeling like we're behind the times, right? So I can go into a particular area, read up on that particular area, and then within a matter of weeks, I'm already behind the times because somebody else has published research in that area. So I think that there's a number of different strategies that you can use in order to keep on top of research. And there's a large body of search and understanding of what technological search is. And I'm not going to go into that, but this is sort of the basic idea behind what we're trying to do here, is look to see at how we can search more effectively and sort of understand how people actually search within the literature. So the first thing is you kind of do a general search, and this is where whenever there is articles that come up, often you get notifications from different journals, right? So I get one from the Academy of Management Journal. That's kind of a lead journal that happens. I sometimes get stuff from Organizational Science. It's kind of a lead journal that I really like. And there is notifications that you get from these different lead journals, right? And they would tell you that X number or X person has published this. This is a recently published thing. Often, I'd love to read those articles, and often what we do is we just kind of look at them, go cursory glance, and kind of see what it's about, and think, oh, that's interesting, and you keep going on your merry old way, right? That's kind of what general search is. Now, before my comprehensive exams, I used to spend, and actually even a year or two after, so for about, for 3 or 4 years, I was doing kind of a general search and sort of reading the literature broadly. So I read all of Academy of Management Journal, for example, and continuously was reading those. But I felt when I was doing that, I felt that I was a little bit behind the scenes. I was understanding what was going on, but I wasn't writing enough, and it was really difficult to keep on track of those things. And I would encourage you to do that for a while, and I would encourage you, if you can maintain it, if your life is set up in such a way that you can do that, I would encourage you to do this sort of broad search and keep on top of the literature, and you're going to be far above what everybody else is very quickly, because you're constantly reading what everybody is doing, the sort of state of the art in the particular field. So general search is really effective in the sense of getting, a broad overview of what is cutting edge at the time. But it is really time consuming, and it is, for a lot of people, it's just infeasible to sort of do that, and especially as you grow and develop in your career, as you become a more well-known scholar and you start developing a network of interacting with people and stuff, it gets really challenging to do that because you just don't have time. So that is the biggest thing with general search. And sort of trying to keep on top of everything is that we are boundedly rational. What's called boundedly rational. We only have some certain number of resources within the day. There's only 24 hours within the day. We only have a certain amount of attention, and we just can't spend the time to sort of learn the literature broadly. And this is totally normal, totally human to do this, and we do this in all sorts of parts of our life. But this is, I'm just highlighting it here within the scholarly community. The second thing is that we could do is kind of an isolated, targeted search, and this is more along the lines of what is called probabilistic search. Sorry, it's a little confusing with probabilistic and probabilistic search. So what does that mean? What you're doing is you're targeting a certain problem, and you're looking at the literature within that particular problem, within the domain of that problem. This is probably the most common kind of search that most of us do. And so what happens is maybe you get some feedback on your research, and somebody says you should look at this particular area. So then you go and read, maybe it's 10 articles, 15 articles, or 5 articles, whatever it is, a certain small number of articles, and get a sense of what it's about. And then you kind of read and understand what it's about, and you're targeting that one little tiny area. And what is really nice with this, it's very targeted. It makes a really good use of your time. It's not broad in any sort of sense, but what you're doing is you're relying on the feedback of others. And this is what most people would do in terms of how they're doing their research development as they're going as scholars and building out their research domain, right? They're going through and they're looking at a specific thing. They're getting feedback from somebody. So the person says, go and do this kind of thing. And you go and take a deep dive into that particular thing, and you look at what those are. And sometimes people will say, you look at those citations, you look at this author, you look at this, this particular domain of research, whatever it is, knowledge domain. And what you're doing is you're just taking a deep dive in that little bit of research, and you're getting a sense of what it is. That's pretty normal to do most of it, mostly to do that particular trajectory. And the third thing is to do a memetic search. And I do this as well. This is a really effective way to do search. And what do I mean by memetic search? This is where you copy and mimic the sort of best practices within the literature, or best practices with other people within the domain. So you might look at people that have very high citation counts, for example. I don't like citation counts in terms of a measure of status or what people are doing. But what you can also do is look to see who are lead scholars, whoever those are within a particular domain, and see who they're citing, see what they're about, look to see what their papers are. A lot of people do this. They'll look at the particular, maybe it's an editor of a journal, and they'll look to see what they're doing. Maybe you send your article into a journal, and it's going to go to an editor. So you look to see what they've written, and you kind of try to make sense of what they wrote, and try to understand how the thing that you're writing sort of fits within their domain of research, right? So you have to sort of think about what is this all about. That is really common. It's an effective way to get a sense of what sort of lead people are doing, and you get to see what they are all about. And that's a really effective way to do search. Most of us do this. We look at lead scholars. We don't just look very broadly, because it's just really difficult to sort of do this. We look to see what lead people are doing and sort of mimic those. So one way that we often sort of look to see, we could do citation counts, but we can also look at people at certain universities or higher status universities and see what they're saying and what they're doing. That's why it's really important to be at high status universities within academia to get, just recognition for your work. In the long run, you're going to get recognition, but often the sort of high status organizations give you a little bit more limelight, right? That more people are paying attention to it. So the fourth thing that you could do is And this is really effective, and I think a lot of people do this. I tend to do this as well from time to time, is that you just don't do any search. And what you do instead is you focus on the particular context of what you're doing. So instead of doing a search within the literature and the academic literature, what you do is you go and you do just see what the context is about. Look to see what you're looking at and try to make sense of what it is. Go within not the academic literature, but just go and talk to managers. Go talk to people in the real world, go talk to, read magazines, trade magazines, things like that, where you're just getting a sense of what is really going on here. And often what you'll do is you'll get really novel insights that are incredibly cool that most people just didn't see before because it's not in the literature, right? Nobody's actually talked about this stuff. The problem is, and this is where you're going to get beat up, is that it becomes very shallow and it feels like you're focused within the sort of context rather than what other people have written. And so you have to look at both, right? So when you go into the context, you eventually have to go and look at the academic literature and start going into different directions and doing these kind of search strategies. So my recommendation in terms of making sure that you keep on track of the scientific research within your area and staying on top of scientific research is to do things that force you to stay on top of the research, right? So often a lot of us will try to teach doctoral courses because doctoral courses, there is a lot of reading that you have to do, and to keep on track of things, you have to be constantly updating the research list. Another thing that you could do if you're teaching a class, for example, is you can have a policy where you read a number of new articles for that class. I tend to do this. I try to aim for something, 10 to 20% sort of new or novel research or new and novel things as much as I can, just to keep on track of things, right? So I always try to circle the research and making sure that I'm targeting new things. In the 10 to 20% is probably a reasonable range. That's what a lot of firms and companies do, is 10 to 20% R&D. So I figure that that's pretty good in terms of keeping on track of things. Sometimes you'll do an overhaul, a massive overhaul every, maybe it's 5 to 6 years or something like that, and do a massive overhaul of your course. But often what you're trying to do is just keep on top of things and paying attention to what other people are doing and trying to add some novelty by reading these different articles. And then for the last thing, and this is actually pretty effective for me, is every time I write a paper, before I actually submit it to a journal or go to some other, send it out to something, I do a broad search. So I go back and I do kind of a general search of the latest literature within the domain. So I try to look at, the lead journals within my field and look to see if there's articles that sort of fit with what they're doing and what it says. I kind of do a look at the title and the abstract and who the authors are, because I already know people that are doing that kind of stuff within the domain, and try to read what they're doing, right? Or maybe look at sort of previous citations in Google Scholar and see what they're actually doing and try to make sense of what they're actually doing. And that keeps on track of things pretty effectively by doing that. It slows you down in terms of the research productivity in the short term, but hopefully in the long term, it kind of keeps you on track of things, and then you start reading a little bit more broadly. So hopefully this helps in terms of staying on top of the research and giving you some tips and tricks in terms of thinking about scientific research in your field. I know it's really tricky. We all feel like we're sinking. So if you feel like that, that's normal. That's science. When you feel like you're sinking, you're doing it right. And you talk to anybody, we all feel like that we haven't read enough, and that we always feel like we're not doing things properly. But just know that you're doing it right. If you have that feeling, it's because you're human, right? You have this sort of bounded rationality, as I mentioned before. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.